Guys, what's up? This is the McAllister's podcast. I'm your host, always Coleman McAllister. On another lovely weekend day, posting a couple days before, or not posting, recording the episode a couple days before this drops. Before I want to get started today, I wanted to give a special shout out to all the listeners, everybody. I think at the time of recording this, the last episode we dropped, where I kind of talked about some of my stories of porn addiction and that kind of thing, actually hit about, I think, like 183 views. I'm going to exit this browser out. So really appreciate everybody for tuning in and watching that. When I started doing these solo episodes, I didn't really know how it was going to go. It kind of just came from, like I've talked about before, just kind of not really wanting to have these conversations. And, I'm kind of, I think I'm going to circle back to this at the end, talking about a book I recently read. But, I think having people on for conversations was mainly a way to discover truth. And after doing it for 3 years, I discovered that was an unachievable goal. There were times where I would have like a guest like 3 times on the show. And I would go through everything, all my arguments with drug legalization or politics or whatever, and they stubbornly refuse to change their mind. And I mean, I like to think of myself, I don't know what kind of what my public track record is or whatever for that, but I always like to think I'm an open-minded person, willing to change their mind. And the sad reality is that most of the population is not willing to do that. So that kind of has been my logic into doing these whole episodes. So, this last one that dropped, 210, talking about porn addiction, that hit. I don't know what's hit on RSS or the audio, but it's done quite well on YouTube. I think it's one of like the top 10 popular episodes. So, really appreciate everybody for doing that, tuning in for that, and supporting the channel. You guys are the blood of the show. Kind of to fucking side sweep that, although God, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. So this morning, I guess the main thing I want to talk about today, a couple things I want to talk about, but I woke up this morning. I had not been on social media for a couple days. Just kind of took a break. With like the addiction and stuff, it's really easy to get trapped in that. So when I have a time where I can just kind of tune out for a few days, I do. I'll pull up the Facebook post that I made. Upon trying to log into TikTok today, on the McAllister Hours TikTok page, I was unable to do so. Completely unable to do so. And I got this notice. Your account was permanently banned due to multiple violations of our community guidelines. And so I clicked the feedback button, and they kind of asked why. And I went to the last option. Like, I don't understand why I got this. They never showed me a clip. Because I've gotten strikes in the past from them, but it's always been on a certain clip. Like, I always know like what and how and all that. And in all reality, I don't know if it's the end of the world. Because out of all the platforms I was engaging with, that was probably the least the least active. Despite weirdly enough, I had the most followers on there. I had about 1,600 followers. Most of that was from a clip with Rick where he talked about driving through South America to like Colombia to like go get some cocaine, and it's funny shit, but wild shit. But I guess the bigger picture of it is what disturbs me, because we're gonna get into this in a little bit. There has been a lot. Trump has had a surprising surge in the caucus polls, and I do feel like we're kind of getting back into that time of 2020, 2021, where we're going to see mass censorship. We're going to see, media influences and all that really try to collectively, squeeze the middleman, squeeze free speech. And this is an extension of that. This is, I feel it coming. I really feel it coming. I think when we get into an election cycle, we're really going to have the same thing that happened in 2020, where we're going to have the suppression of information, which in turn is going to affect election results. I'm not someone who believes that the election was rigged in the sense that, people like went in, changed votes. I mean, no more than that normally happens, right? But I do think when you have Hollywood, media, social media, really any large entity in America, all not only rooting for one party, but aggressively attacking the other side, that is going to cause a rigged election. When you have COVID mandates and allow people to vote like 4 to 6 months before the actual election with mail-in ballots, like it's going to be that's a fishy election from the get-go. And I really do feel like we're kind of back on that track right now in society. I do really feel like, this channel, the Unhinged, Uncensored, where, me and Lolo kind of go into some wild territories. Like, I feel like a lot of these platforms are going to end up being censored. And, I think that's a really sad thing for, small businesses or, entrepreneurial people who are doing like what I do, who have unconventional views, who want to put that out into the world. I do think that that's going to be silenced. And this is kind of something I worried about and feared with 2024. I was kind of hoping that the establishment would not take this whole thing with Trump so seriously, but they are. So it's kind of a weird time. But yeah, I mean, fuck TikTok. I've always hated that app. It's the thirstiest. It's the it has by far probably the most censorship besides Facebook. I mean, I don't even know if Facebook is as bad as TikTok, but TikTok is so blatant with it. That's kind of the problem. And there are a lot of channels that I've heard of that like aren't even like what I do, like aren't even being controversial, whatever, that they get their accounts deleted too. I thought about, maybe I could start a new account. I don't really feel it's worth it. I'm okay with just focusing on YouTube and Facebook and Insta. I'm totally fine with that. And if there's mass censorship on that, on those platforms too, I don't really know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to go third party, focus more on the website or Patreon or whatever, which would be really sad. But that is kind of the good thing about this weird time we're in, is there are alternate platforms. There are alternate ways to get your voice out. It's harder. It's a lot harder, but it can be done. That being said, so that's kind of the first point. I also want to kind of talk about kind of some self-discovery that I've been going through. I may have another post on Facebook, kind of revealing to the world, I guess I'm doing it right now, that I have decided to finally cross the bridge into anarchism. And it's weird even saying that word, because I think, when people go through the public school system or whatever, or just live in the geist of government, I think they've done a very good job brainwashing people and really putting a negative connotation on anarchy, which makes sense because, like if you were Walmart and Target was a competing force, you wouldn't be like, oh, Target's great. Like you would do everything you could to condemn Target, right? So, it makes sense that they would take an idea like anarchism and just say, just talk about how fucked up it is all the time and portray it in a certain way. There's a book I have not yet read by one of my favorite authors, Michael Malice, and podcasters. I read The New Right by him. I read The White Pill. I really love those books. I own both of them. And I also own the Anarchist Handbook, which I have not. I kind of purchased it initially, not necessarily like I do want to, like, I'm obviously going to read it here in a little bit. But he's just someone that I support. I think is a good voice, and even though I don't agree with him 100%, he is one of those people who are on the right side of history in my mind. So I love supporting him in any way I can. Go check out his show. You're welcome. You are, yeah, or not you are. YOUR welcome. Specifically, he has a lot of cool guests on. He just had Dr. Drew on the other day, or a couple days ago. Anyways, and it's kind of weird because part of me does kind of wonder if I'm just kind of going with that guys as well, right? Like, am I just kind of going with the flow in that way? Like, what was it? I was listening to some I think it was the last podcast. I think it was actually Michael Mouse, him and Destiny. He was kind of arguing and talking about how there's something kind of dangerous in, like, kind of all gearing in that opposing side too. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I do see his point. I do think they're kind of, I mean, look, and there are cases of anarchists that have been violent people, right? Like, I don't condone violence. Basically, my thought process in anarchism, for those who don't know, anarchism is basically a complete secession from the state. So there's no government, there's no force that is telling you that you cannot do something, like, period. But I mean, really, I guess how that translates to my life is, it's been kind of a relief in a way, because I think when I was more libertarian, minarchist, there was something when you're still kind of playing into the idea of government. You find yourself emotionally invested, you get upset very easily. And I really have felt like the last couple days since I've really kind of just made this decision, really have found myself at peace. Having the idea that, it's like the same reason I don't go to church. Like, my family and my partner's family still goes to church and I don't go. Because in my mind, I think that that's a malevolent force in itself as well. And I think going to church, kind of gives it that credit. Like, you're kind of acknowledging that it's a legitimate thing. And I don't believe that. And I think the same goes for government. I think if I've decided I'm no longer voting, I am not going to participate in voting anymore, because again, I think if you play into the system, if you validate it by voting, I think Seth Leopold said it really well. You're in a way kind of part of the problem in a way, as harsh as that sounds. And I agree with him. I agree. Which is why I have just decided to go down this path to really just remove myself from that whole system, from the voting system. I don't believe in the idea of democracy. I think it's bullshit. You're telling me that slavery was okay until 1860. It's just not a base of morality. There's morality, and then there's this constructive facade of what we believe is morality, which is laws. And I don't think that something being illegal makes it wrong. The simplest counter to that is drugs. The idea of somebody using anything, heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl, cannabis, alcohol, whatever. The idea of someone using that peacefully in their home, and then for an outside force to come in and throw them in a cage because they made that decision, or even selling it, right? Like, if somebody voluntarily wants to go in and say, "Hey, I want to purchase this," to arrest both that person and the person selling it, I think it's just ridiculous to get. I mean, and the people selling it, I mean, they get ridiculous sentences, like 10, 20 years. I mean, for cannabis. Let alone, I mean, anything else. So I just think the whole thing's ridiculous. And especially somewhere like Iowa, where cannabis is still legal. Like, participating in that system Because look, people are going to vote a certain way. People are going to be a certain way. And if you're like me and you're in that minority, you're never going to win. Iowa is always going to be red. Iowa is always going to have a Republican, neoconservative base. It's just how it is. Now, I think you could say Des Moines, like if Des Moines were self-governing or Cedar Rapids was self-governing or whatever, I think that would be different. But I guess there's a logic. I guess here's the main reason why I've decided to become an anarchist. Is the logical conclusion to any government is that it will eventually get bigger and bigger and bigger and impose more will on other people. And as an anarchist, this is something I really struggle with. The idea, I felt like I was kind of a fraud, like I was a hypocrite, kind of sitting in that, that half-assed middle ground where you're like, I oppose government, but it should be for these things, etc. And they're playing counter arguments to anarchism that I would love to debate with anyone if they feel they would like to. But yeah, this is kind of just my stance. This is my position on it. This isn't me promoting the idea. A lot of people disagree with the idea of anarchism, and I probably think it's bullshit. I've been claimed to be an anarchist. Several people have called me an anarchist for years. I've always found myself to be I've always called myself an anarchist, sympathetic. Just not entirely on board until today, where I've just thought about it long enough. I've been thinking about it a lot for the last probably 4 months. Really been contemplating anarchism, thinking about going through kind of logical steps in my head. Changing my opinion, which is something I really hope people can do. Okay, so one of the big things I wanted to talk about, this kind of ties into what I was talking about with kind of the TikTok censorship. Some really crazy things have been happening over the last couple of days. Like I said, I'm recording this Saturday before this drops Monday, so things don't usually happen on the weekend or Saturday, Sunday in terms of this. The main thing where Trump has been ordered to pay $83 million to E. Jean Carroll. The fact that, they always release this information on a weekend, or I should say toward the end of the week, like a Friday. A lot of times they'll announce it on Friday because then the business week is over. They give everybody 2 days to cool off and drink and forget about it, whatever, and then they come back Monday and they don't even remember it. I think it's intentional like that. But so a couple different things have been happening with Trump. What happened Friday? I'll just read this article. Jury. Fuck, I got things going in multiple places. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Jury orders Trump to pay E. Jean Carroll $83 million for defamation. A federal jury ordered Donald Trump to pay more than $83 million for defaming warrior E. Jean Carroll, handing the former president of financial and legal blow just as he moves closer to cementing the Republican nomination for November's presidential election. The new award dwarfs the $5 million that is a different federal jury award to Carroll last year after finding Trump liable for sexually assaulting her in the 1990s and then defaming her when he denied it in 2022. That's interesting because it wouldn't surprise me if Trump sexually assaulted this woman at all. I don't think he's a good person. I don't think but it's kind of interesting that, they never had a criminal case and so they already awarded her $5 million and then they're just kind of coming back and you're like, oh, by the way, you got to pay an additional $83 million. I think it's a little ridiculous. Despite the fact that, something like that may have happened, right? So I think that's interesting that they kind of just, that this came right after Trump's New Hampshire win, right? Which people were, I was kind of curious to see if that would actually pan out for him, since Nikki Haley, that's her prime state. But the fact that he beat her in that, I mean, I think at this point we know it's going to be Trump. We know it's going to be Trump that makes this nomination. He's mopping the floor. It's fucking wild. And okay, here's the other thing that happened the day before. So, ex-Trump aide Peter Navarro sentenced to 4 months in prison over House January 6th probe. Essentially, Navarro was convicted in September on 2 counts of contempt of Congress, one for failing to produce documents related to the probe, and another for skipping his deposition. So, really kind of just giving the government a fuck you to that, right, in my opinion, rightfully feeling like he didn't need to cooperate, give them information because it's kind of a bullshit thing. And now he's facing 4 months in prison. And, will he probably serve that for 4 months or full 4 months? Probably not. He'll probably get probation. He'll probably get out early. That's usually what happens, especially with, high profile people. But I do think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that the media and all these, like we talk about these entities, the same entities that suppress this channel, that they're doing that they are really doing, they're doing a repeat of 2020. And I really wonder there are two reasons that come to my mind. One, that they're idiots, and they're doing exactly what they did in 2016 and 2020, and just going the regular government route, suppressing information. I think it's really kind of interesting that they're doing that, if that's the case. Number two, I think the likely thing, and something that I've argued for a while, I do believe that I don't think it's a secret that Republicans and Democrats are on the same team. Like, they are. They play this charade where they're against each. Like, I'm talking about the people that are up and top, the top tiers of government. I don't think it's a secret that they are on that shit. That they're all in on it. All these people, they go out to dinner and get drinks afterwards on opposing parties. Like, they don't. It's all charade. It's all masquerade. And I do really wonder if the promotion of Trump is intentional. That they want to have a repeat 2020, because we know what's going to happen in 20. Like, we know what's going to happen. It's going to be a repeat. He's going to lose. Biden's going to win again, and people are going to get upset again. It's going to cause more civil unrest. It's going to give them more reasons to impose their will on the people. I don't think that it's an accident that we're seeing Trump pull ahead, do what he's always done, and it's just going to be a repeat. And like, we knew that, right? I think like I was talking to Molly today about like how upsetting it is that we're repeating 2020, and she's like, but like you knew that was going to happen. Like, everybody knew that was going to happen, and she's right. She's right. Everybody knew that. So it's interesting. It's just interesting to see this all go down. If the allegations against Jean Carroll are true, I think that's unfortunate. However, I mean, there's a fine line between some sense of justice and abusing that justice, and like obviously doing something that's just trying to fucking milk him. And because this isn't going to be the first, right? I mean, he's facing federal charges right now. I mean, he could even have to pay out more money. And Trump's a narcissist. He's a self-serving person. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they milked him to the point where he just said, "All right, I'm out. I'm done. Like, I don't care." He already threw his whole base under the train or the bus. I can't even fucking. Yeah, he just he threw him in the trash when the day after January 6th he condemned everybody. And he's not someone that is, I don't think, like, I don't think he cares. Like, you know, he preaches about caring for his base and all that, and it's all bullshit. He's a narcissist. Trump is at face value who he is. There's no secret thing to him. There's no charade. Nothing like that. Trump is Trump, essentially. So, yeah, kind of scary times we live in. I'm not gonna lie. It's a weird time. It's a weird time seeing the authoritarianism and seeing all that's going on. Authoritarianism is it's just gonna ramp up. And again, this goes back to me being an anarchist. I'm over it. I'm over the bullshit. Okay, I wasn't sure if we were gonna be able to get to everything, but I don't know. That fucking TikTok thing threw me off this morning. I almost wanted to save all this till tomorrow, but I figured I would go into it while it's fresh. I shouldn't have eaten those fucking CBD gummies though. I feel like they calm me down. I feel like I should have just like kept the anger and anxiety up, and then just drank coffee, and then that would have been more entertaining. But I feel like I'm a little more peaceful about it. I should be. But I mean, again, that goes back to my whole argument with anarchism. Like I do think it's a peaceful mentality, peaceful way to live. Is that Molly sneezing? I think it is. All right. I wanted to play this clip, or really just a section of this podcast. So, kind of diving into my next point. So I was listening to a podcast recently, the Lex Fridman podcast, which I have some conflicting views about Lex Fridman. I do think he is naive. I do think he kind of just thinks that if you love enough people, that thing's going to work out, and I think it's bullshit. You could have all the love in the world, but you have one person with hate and a weapon, and it doesn't matter. And I just think that the obvious thing that really infuriates me is that he deletes comments. He intentionally goes in, or he hires people to go in and delete comments. There's been Facebook posts and social media posts that he's taken down himself when he, sees backlash. A very emotional response. And I get it as a content creator. Like, there are definitely times where people have commented really shitty things in my videos that have sent me over the edge even. But I think it takes a real outside look to realize that, that look, I mean, I think commenting on like YouTube videos or whatever, that is like the equivalent to in a time hundreds of years ago where people were out in the streets and, professing what they thought was real, having that platform. I think in a sense, when you delete a comment, it is kind of akin to like, physically removing somebody from the street and beating them. I know that sounds extreme, but, we live in a peaceful society. And I think when the only way you can really promote yourself is through this, guys, you are kind of committing an act against freedom of speech. So, I mean, I think it's just obvious because you go into any video that he's done. And I mean, you look at people like Mark Zuckerberg, you look at people that, who's the CEO of Pfizer, I can't even remember his name. I mean, he's done some divisive episodes and every single comment is positive. And there's no way in hell that, I mean, I myself have gone in his videos and been like, this is bullshit. And it's never gotten any traction because I'm sure he deletes it, or whoever he hires deletes it the minute they see any negative comment. I just think that's unfortunate, especially for someone who promotes free speech and tries to have. And look, I'll give him credit. I do think he is one of the few people who really rides in the middle of that divisiveness, the left-right divisiveness. And he is really despite the censorship of comments, he is really able to give people that open platform. And I do congratulate him for that. I think that's awesome. He's willing to have Joe Rogan. He's willing to have really anybody. Criminals, like he will have that conversation with anyone, or let them have the conversation. even if there are points in the conversation that seem naive or whatever, like at least he's willing to have them. And I give him all the credit in the world for that. And this debate is actually a very good example of that, I think. Although I will say, so this is a debate between Ben Shapiro and Destiny. Destiny is a liberal, progressive type. He's a streamer. He's done like debates with Milo Yiannopoulos. Very politically inclined. And then Ben Shapiro, who needs no introduction, right? Ben Shapiro isn't a bad pick, but I do kind of feel like he could have picked, well, here's a couple things. He could have picked, there are probably other people that he could have picked. And to be fair, I do think people on the left are generally less willing to have a debate. You see it with Joe Rogan, someone like Joe Rogan, who has like reached out to multiple people on that side, and they've all refused to go on the show because they live in their own echo chamber. Where if someone signals that this man's bad or whatever, he has like people just won't even engage with him. And I do think it's a fair correlation to say that people on the right are generally more able to have that conversation, to have that debate. There are plenty of examples where they don't. There are plenty of examples where conservatives like censor other people. Ben Shapiro actually he had an interview on BBC where he walked out because he didn't like how it was being conducted. I kind of think that's bullshit. I've been in the hot seat. I've been in the middle of really shitty interviews, and I think it takes a certain skill to be able to get out of that. And if you can't really do that as a political commentator, there's something kind of off. So that's kind of, I guess my criticism off the bat on this is I do think he probably could have picked better people to have this debate. And I really would, because I always kind of have I really hate how people compare left and right in general. I think it's a stupid comparison. Really, what I think is a better comparison is authoritarian, anti-authoritarian, or libertarian, anarchist, whatever. Because whether you're on the left or right, whatever viewpoint you have, you're still taking an authoritarian edge. Both sides are saying, this is what we want to impose the will on the people. So I would, he's good friends with Michael Malice, who's a great debater. I think he could have easily sat in the middle of that interview, and they could have all three had that conversation. I think that would have been a fantastic interview. But he wanted to play up to, what people view, what's popular, right, left and right, how the American system works, left and right. So whatever. That aside, I do think it was actually a very good conversation. I thought they were both able to really give their points of view and debate in a civilized manner. They were cracking jokes through the whole thing. Like it wasn't hostile. I do think that is something that's very positive about Lex Fridman. Is besides the Kanye interview, which that's not on Lex, that's just Kanye. Besides that, everything that I've seen of his content is very. I appreciate it. I appreciate his ability to, keep it even. But I guess before we get too much further, let's just play this clip. This is them talking about education. I thought it would kind of tie it into something that's been causing a lot of stir up in Iowa recently with Ken Reynolds suspending school lunches. So I don't know how much this will play. Oh, wow, it's a pretty long clip. Or a segment. So let's just play it. Let's see what happens.
I'm excited for this conversation because I consider you to be really intelligent. But I feel like sometimes there are ways that conservatives talk about certain issues that seem to defy logic and reason, I guess. So here, and I'm sure you feel the same way about I feel the same way about progressives, but even some liberals for sure. Before I ask this question, it's going to relate to education. We can agree broadly speaking that statistics are real and that not everybody could do everything. So for a grounded example, my life was pretty bad. I got into streaming and I turned my life around, and that was really cool, but I can't expect everybody to do what I did, right? Like everybody being able to join the NBA or to be like a streamer.
Well, of course, everybody has different qualities, sure.
Okay. So I used to be a lot more libertarian when I was 21. And one of the things that dramatically changed kind of my view on government manipulation of things in the I guess, in society came when it came time to deal with my son and the school that he went.
Okay, I want to pause right here. I think this is a huge thing that has deterred me. Fuck. God damn it. I do that every fucking time.
Achieve more.
God fucking damn it. I need to stop doing that. But this is one thing that this is kind of why I've decided not to have kids. Because I do think that there is something to I've seen in my life. I've seen it in even people like this, where having a kid really changes your view. And it's almost always in authoritarian leaning. And I mean, he even said it here. He was a libertarian, and then he had kids. He was like, okay, now we need to have this authoritarian thing come in so my kid's life can be quote unquote safe or whatever. And, you know, I almost kind of think it removes a sense of responsibility from the parent. I mean, that might be a harsh thing to say, but I'm sorry. I think when you are just going to say, hey, I'm just going to rely on the public school system to educate my kid, and that way I can focus on my own thing, and he can just be, I think that's kind of fucked up. I think there should be, well, in my opinion, I think it should be privatized, but like there should also be some form of home education or whatever, you know. It's just an unrealistic idea to be like, okay, I'm going to rely on this, and I'm going to, however I feel, I'm going to fight my way for this to happen in a certain way. I just think it's dumb. But anyways, and I'm so sorry.
Or to be like a stream.
Well, of course, everybody has different qualities, sure.
Okay. So I used to be a lot more libertarian.
Fuck with me. I hope this doesn't fuck anything up. Okay.
When I was 21. And one of the things that dramatically changed kind of my view on government manipulation of things in the, I guess, in society came when it came time to deal with my son and the school that he went to. And one of the things that I noticed was when it came time to send my son to school, I could either do private education or I could do public. Personally, I did 12 years of Catholic private education. However, the public schools in Nebraska, depending on where you lived, were very, very, very good. And I opted for a certain district. I bought a house there. I moved there. And then my son was able to go to those schools. And he's been going through those schools. And the difference of availability of like technology, like these kids are taking home iPads in like first grade. They've got like huge computer labs and everything. Do you think that there is some type of, I don't want to say injustice or unfairness, because I'm not even looking at it that way, just pragmatically, that there might be children that are in certain schools that if they just had better funding or more access to technologies or things available to them, that those kids would become more productive members of society, that with like a little bit of a help, they could actually achieve more and do better for all of society?
Sure. That's not wrong. However, is that a fantasy world that you're really gonna? And I think Ben Shapiro kind of breaks this down a little bit, but you're living in a fantasy world, man. If you really think that like you can just have this invisible hand, quote unquote, just give everybody everything, like where does that come from? Like nothing's free. I mean, and look, that's the thing, right? And they're all giving this for free. The parents aren't paying for it. There's no real market representation for these iPads or whatever. It's just kind of a skewed way of thinking where you can just be like, hey, and this kind of goes into the whole thing with Kim Reynolds and school lunches, but we'll get into this. We'll get into that a little bit. Let's finish this clip.
I think that on the list of priorities when it comes to education, the availability of technology is actually fairly low on the list of priorities.
Sure. The two things I've heard are food availability and I think air conditioning, I think, are the two biggest ones that I hear, but sure.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing in terms of education itself, not just the physical facilities that we're talking about, would actually be two-parent family households.
I agree.
Communities that have fathers in them is actually the number one decisive, according to Roland Fryer and many studies done on this particular topic. And the idea that money alone, that investment of resources is the top priority in schooling is belied by the fact that LAUSD, which is where I went to school when I was younger, they pour an enormous amount of money into LAUSD. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars very often per student, and it does not result in better schooling outcomes. And so when you say, if we could give every kid an iPad, would you give every kid an iPad? The question is not, if I had a replicator machine from Star Trek, would I give everybody an enormous amount of stuff? Sure, I would. Every resource is finite, every resource is limited, and you have to prioritize what are the outcomes that you seek in terms of the means with which you are seeking them. And so, again, I think that the question is I quibble with the premise of the question, which is that, again, the chief injustice when it comes to education on the list of injustices is lack of availability to technology, or that it's a funding problem. I just don't think that's the case.
Sure, and I can half agree with you there.
Yeah. I thought he had a good response there. And they even kind of, at one point, they go, here, I'll switch back. I think they even at one point go into school lunches specifically, and they talk, and I think Ben Shapiro does a good job pointing out that there's a lot of waste involved, and that's kind of with any government program. There's always a bunch of waste. You saw it in the Soviet Union. Like the market is the best way to really even things out. Someone has something they want, they give money, they get that thing. Not just like, okay, we're going to estimate and we're just going to like create all this stuff for quote unquote free, but it's not really free because they're just stealing people's money to fund it. And then government just works inefficiently, so then they're just going to waste a bunch of shit. And then you have a bigger problem than what the problem you was that was trying to resolve. I mean, honestly, the more you put into government programs, the more you're eventually going to, like, you're going to have mass starvation. It happens in every communist regime. They're like, okay, we're going to feed you, we're going to have bread lines or whatever. And then the shit runs out because it's just not it's just not a workable system. So I've had a couple debates about the whole Kim Reynolds lunch thing. And like, look, I don't like Kim Reynolds. And I think there's a fair argument to be made that, if she was going to cut some kind of funding in the government, there are way better ways she could have done that. I mean, she could have cut down on the police easily. That's just been that's just been like a disgusting amount of money that's been poured into the police department. They have like a new car they have like a new fleet of cars every fucking 6 months. It's just ridiculous. Other things related to that, she could have cut down salaries or something, probably her own salary if she was actually a fucking good person. I don't even know what her salary is. But with a lot of those politicians, they're also making money on the side and crazy shit like that. So when it comes down to this issue, like when I saw the article and I saw people getting upset about it, like I didn't really care. I'm like, I'm sorry. I had a friend that like, I'm not gonna say who it is. He sent me a voice message and he was like telling me that he was like gonna start a petition to like sue the state of Iowa for this injustice of getting rid of it's summer lunch programs, which I told Lola about these. Like, why are your kids going to summer school? I thought it was kind of funny. It's also just kind of a weird premise that like, okay, so, I mean, I don't know. This sounds really shitty, I know, but like, so what are all the kids' parents just starving? Like, you're really telling me that they only get one meal 5 times a week, and then the rest of the time they're starving? Like, what are there like? The parents would be dead, right? Like, or what? Maybe they're on food stamps. I don't know, but like, and that's another thing. I would guarantee that they're all on food stamps. So I don't really think it's necessarily a correct correlation to say that they're not eating. The quality is less. I agree. But again, that's a byproduct of the problem. Is when you just pour all your funding and you pour all this energy into the government programs, then it's going to be shit. It always is. And there's going to be waste, and it's just an inefficient system. So, like I said, of all the things that you could criticize Kim Reynolds for, I think this is probably pretty low on the list, in my opinion. And there are a lot of people who disagree with me on that. Sorry, you're talking to an anarchist. You're talking to someone who heavily opposes government programs. So I don't know what to tell you. I think it's just like he points out with the how Ben Shapiro really disagrees with the premise of the question. I agree with that. I do think it's kind of a silly premise to be like, oh well, these if you're gonna just look at it in the viewpoint of like the simple like kids are gonna starve, which I don't necessarily think is true, but even with that, you're refusing to look at the bigger picture, which is that sure you're putting a Band-Aid issue on right now, but this bubble's gonna burst and then it's gonna be catastrophic compared to kids not getting summer lunches. I don't know. So that was kind of my 2 cents on that. This is kind of something I debated with a few people, and I saw this clip, and I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about. At the end of the day, fuck Kim Reynolds. I can't stand that cunt. She's awful. I'm making a movie about how awful she is. So I by no means support Kim Reynolds, but I just think it's kind of a non-issue. I just think it's just another thing to get upset about. And there are plenty of other things to get upset about. I think drug legalization is a big one. I think that would resolve a lot of problems. And look, here's another thing. I'd be willing to bet that a lot of those kids probably do have people who are either addicted to drugs or have gotten charges for using drugs. And I think both those issues would be alleviated if it was legalized. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, one more thing I want to talk about before we wrap up the episode today. This book I just read, Zen the Art of Motorcycle Maidens. I read it like in a surprising 4 months, which is amazing for me. Like 100, because I try to do 10 pages a night. I try to read at least 10 pages, which I know isn't a lot. I mean, and that number's been ticking up. I'm reading a book right now called Not Normal by Jonathan Mooney, or Normal Sucks by Jonathan Mooney. And I've been reading that at a pretty good pace. I'm gonna minimize both these. So yeah, but I really found the book interesting. Basically the premise of the book is, so it's based on a true story written by Robert M. Persig. I think I'm saying that right. But it's based on a true story about him going on a bicycle trip with his son. Kind of through the, I think they start in like the Dakota or somewhere in the Dakotas, somewhere in the Midwest, and motorcycle through Montana and California, and just while he's doing this, he's kind of going through this, like he believes himself to be, and this is kind of where his Buddhism comes in. Like he believes himself to be like a whole new person after this teaching experience. I think it's Thaddeus is how you pronounce it. He refers to himself as that prior to where he is currently, like going through this bike ride. Basically, like he's come to this point of self-discovery where, because as a teacher, as it footballs back and forth, as a teacher, he was posed with the question, or he was another teacher said, make sure you have quality education, and that really just led him down this rabbit hole of what is quality, how you define quality, can quality be defined, and basically he just found that it was innate. I like that. That's kind of the basic summary. Like there's like classical reasoning and romantic reasoning, whereas like classical kind of the more logical, romantic's the more romantic is the more emotional side of it, and they're both valid, right? Like when if you have a piece of art, like there's no like level of education or like dictation or whatever that is going to determine that. So basically, I think what it basically concludes to, because this man goes insane. I mean, it talks about how for a week he was just pissing on the floor and smoking cigarettes and staring at a wall. I mean, he went that insane. He left his job as a teacher. He went to go get education to be a philosopher, and he found that even at the higher of the levels that he went, the more bullshit it was. He called it the Church of Reason, where basically it's almost kind of like government or a church or a literal church, where there's an authoritarian figure who's going to tell you how it is, and that's always going to be the case. So he basically comes to this point of self-discovery and that's why it's called Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The level of Zen where you just do not care. You don't care about it. And you just learn to let go. And I think he really concludes in that also. I don't know if he says it, but I mean, it's in my mind, it's between the lines, that there's also no truth. And this is something that's kind of led me to anarchism, is like the idea of truth. Is there a universal truth? I don't know. My gut says there is. my gut says that there's something through evolution and whatever that is just a fact of life. And maybe even if you can't pinpoint it exactly, it's there, right? I was talking with someone else who disagreed with me, and we had this conversation about it. And it's just interesting. And that book has really made me think. I was going to pick something out to read, but I'm lazy and I didn't. But I highly encourage everybody to read that book. It's from the 70s. And it's kind of interesting because he actually talks about how, and I think this happens with any piece of literature that's like successful, is an author has an intention. I was listening to Lex Friedman again, talk about 1984, and he kind of talked about this, how, Orwell actually didn't really like a lot of the reaction to it. It was more of a satirical book. And I think that's that is always kind of the case with artists when they create something as the public takes it a certain way, and then they're like, no, that's not really how I meant it to be. So I thought that was kind of interesting, him talking about that. Also a little racist. I won't lie. Like a lot of people in that time, a little racist. Likes to talk about how the white man ruins things. And the book I'm reading currently, it's a lot about white people, how shitty white people are. And I hate that correlation. It's just such a stupid correlation. Like, what? Are you going to tell me that the Rwanda genocide was because of black people? No, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to like correlate somebody's race to something being bad. And I mean, in that book, Normal Sucks, he correctly criticizes these institutions that are doing things to like eugenics, like to disable people, and how awful the conditions were in mental institutions. Like that's all correct, but then he correlates it to people being white, and that's so stupid. That's just such a stupid correlation. Like you're taking the most face value, emotional aspect of that, and you're just gonna say white, boom. Look, and I think there is something to be said for a white culture. Like I'm not going to say that were there a majority of white people in a certain time who were racist? Probably. Yeah, like, yes, that's 100% true. But to say that is the reason, I think that's just ridiculous. That's my 2 cents on that. Hey, we almost made the hour. Basically made the hour. Should I just like fart for the next 5 minutes? Just put a bunch of fart sounds in. Or I can just bend over and just take a shit into the microphone and we can have that. No, I'm kidding. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Like I said, you're the bloodline of the show. We're changing the time. If you haven't figured it out already, we're changing the time to 2 p.m. on Monday. I've decided it's better for the algorithm. It just makes more sense. I think when the show started and we were having guests and kind of having wild conversations, it kind of made sense for it to be a late night type of thing. Not even late night, but a nighttime show. Now it just doesn't really matter. When it's just me talking into a microphone, it's kind of bullshit. It would make more sense for the Unhinged Uncensored to be that. But anyway, it's in that podcast every Tuesday at 2 p.m. We have a lot of tomorrow's episode, especially, is gonna be wild. We had Dirt Nasty Beats on, and we talked a lot about Trump and the election and January 6th, and it got a little heated. I won't even lie. We all walked away friends, of course, but it was a little heated, and that was kind of interesting. And then almost every Thursday at 2 p.m. I know we kind of took a break this last week, but we'll be back. We at least do it twice a month. We try to do it 4 times a month, but it doesn't always work out because I will say of all the things I'm doing, that podcast is on the bottom end of my priorities. So everybody go check those out. Thank you for tuning in as always, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.